So this video is more of a reflection on what love is. If you'd like to understand what real love is, I have a very nice definition for it which debunks essentially all other perspectives very nicely, which I'll share. If you want to understand what real love is, then listen to this whole video where I explain it in depth. Alright, so real love is the desire for someone else or yourself to grow spiritually, physically, and mentally. It's, if we could break it down to self-love, so that's the desire for yourself to grow, and then there's, let's just call it the usual type of or idea of love, which is desiring someone else to, having the desire for someone else to grow spiritually, mentally, physically. Now, why does this definition debunk the rest? Well, I think the traditional, or let's say the romantic, traditional sort of rom-com kind of definitions of love that you see are really just projections of one's own insecurity and ego. Let's say, this is not really a rom-com example, but let's say if there's a mother who has a son, and her son goes to primary school, and the primary school is located a bit far away, so he can't walk there, so he needs to take the bus. But his mother doesn't want her son to get kidnapped, hurt, or anything like that, and she packages it like that, like, I'm going to drive you to school there and back every single day because I don't want anything to happen to you. Well, that may be packaged as love for she loves the child, but what really might be going on is that she doesn't want to lose him. She's just protecting herself. Because if the son is gone, her world collapses. So she by all means makes sure he doesn't disappear or get hurt. It's simply a projection of her own insecurity and her own, what would you call that? It's self-protection, let's say. And also, funnily enough, it's not, if she would desire her son to grow spiritually, mentally, physically, she would let the son grow up, go out into the world, get, let's say, relatively hurt, because that's what happens when you go out into the world, because the world is full of challenges, but you grow from it. She would let the son go out in the world, learn, let's say, and become stronger, and that's best for the son. That's how you develop a whole person. But if you overprotect the son becomes very sensitive, because it's always protected, and then eventually, because life is challenging, you can't protect somebody entirely from life, something will come around, and when it hits the kid will fall flat on its face because it can't take the real world. Hence, by driving the kid to school every single day, she's actually hurting her son in the long term. Hence, that's not love. Another examples are, let's say, a nice example is the honeymoon phase. That's not love. Typically, chemically, what goes on in the head, that's not love. What happens when you fall in love with someone? First of all, interesting enough, falling in love. Falling is not necessarily, doesn't necessarily have a positive connotation, but it implies that you are out of control. You fall for it, not intentionally, let's say. And it's a bit like this. When children are babies, or when humans are babies, at the beginning, like a freshly born baby cannot distinguish the difference between itself and the world. Like, if it moves its arm, the entire world moves. So it basically thinks it is one with the world. Now, when it gets older, and for example, in the terrible twos, eventually, or I think actually even after 6 months of being a baby, the baby realizes that it is a separate entity from the world. For example, it cries, but the mother's not always there to feed it, or it wants to play, and sometimes the parents aren't down to play. So it realizes it's actually alone. It is a separate entity that has its own responsibility for its life, and it it's like it's metaphorically alone in comparison to the rest of the world. It is not one with the world. That's very frightening. That's existentially frightening because a child, if it's left alone, literally, it dies. A human child needs roughly 18 years of energy, time, and money inputs from its parents in order to raise it healthily. And if it doesn't get that, especially as a young kid, if it gets abandoned by the parents, because it's such a dependent being, it dies. Hence, the baby is primed to, like, by all means avoid being abandoned. Now, it's terrifying. I actually think one of the biggest fears for any child is to be abandoned. It's really that. It's abandonment. It's terrifying. So we adopt that mindset of being abandoned long into our life, like for the rest of our life essentially. And as soon as we fall in love with someone, the boundaries between being alone, being responsible for ourselves, they fall. Because suddenly you almost like become one entity with this other person. Like the boundaries, I think one could call them, like the author Scott Peck in his book, The Path, no, the Road Less Traveled, is he calls it ego boundaries. Your ego boundaries collapse and you suddenly become one with this person, and that's wonderful because you suddenly take the responsibility for your like well-being, for your health or something, or for your loneliness, and sort of like hand it on to your partner, the person you're in love with. And that's not healthy because you are simply hiding from the reality of being alone in this world, being a separate entity from the universe. And that's not good because you're deceiving yourself really. And it gets dangerous then because they deliver you a a a a false antidote to the like existential anxiety maybe, but that means they have your power then, or they have power over you. They can manipulate you because your ego is protected by them, and you'll do a lot to protect your ego or maintain it being protected. So if they leave you, then that really hits hard because they carry your persona, they carry your well-being, they carry, like I said, they take the responsibility for your well-being sort of, or for your happiness maybe, and love, and then it's suddenly gone, and that's horrible. That's really bad. That's very painful. And what I've been questioning recently is it ever possible for humans to not like fall into that love but still have a loving relationship? Because in order for that to happen, the human would need to like subordinate its ego completely. And I think the number one requirement before you can love someone else fully, you need to love yourself. You need to have the desire for yourself to grow physically, mentally, spiritually, and like respect yourself. If you don't have that, I don't think you can healthily love someone else. So you would need to do that first, but that's very much an ideal. I don't know if it's humanly possible to do it, because I broke up with my girlfriend 2 days ago, and it was okay because we drifted apart, and I realized I could live without her easily, because of quarantine now. She's in a different country, and I haven't seen her for a while, and our communicating broke a little bit, and I wasn't talking much to her, but I realized I'm fine. However, a few months before that, I by accident sort of broke up with her, and it absolutely hit me. I was in tears. I couldn't sleep all night, and I had to get her back. And that was because of my ego, because I thought I'd lost her, like I'd had possession of her, and now she was gone. And that's very much what Buddhism states, the Four Noble Truths is that life is suffering, and suffering stems from cravings and desires, and it was the desire for her that made me suffer, whereas she's not my possession. She's a separate entity, and she doesn't determine my self-value. And I've realized that now, but I need to work on myself so much still in order to be able to love someone properly and have a healthy relationship in the future. But I think I'm comparatively very advanced in that process of self-love compared to others, but I still feel like I have so much to go. And I'm 22 now, so how long does that take? Will it ever even happen? Will I ever get there? I really don't know. And I think it will take a lot of intentional energy to invest in that endeavor in order to subordinate the ego and know my internal self-value and not derive it from outside objects, people, and not desire them to make up my self-value. So maybe you can relate to this. I hope this definition of love could help you a bit. I'll definitely make more videos on it. It's from a book called The Road Less Traveled by Scott Peck. It's my favorite book of all time so far. I think it's absolutely excellent because it also describes the relationship between self-love and discipline, which is amazing, I think. And it describes the dynamics between parents and children and how parents damage kids, let's say, during the period of parenting. So there's a lot to be learned to it. I hope you learned something from this video, and I'll make some more content on this topic of love in the future. So thank you for listening.